Good evening and welcome to the Get Football Mercato show, here every weekday to bring you the latest transfer news from across France, Germany and Italy. I'm your host Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Stefano Mercuri from Get Italian Football News, Axel Falk from Get German Football News and Maitland from Get French Football News. We'll start in France this evening with a high-profile youngster, which seems to happen a lot in France, to be fair, at the moment, attracting foreign interest. Grant, and an Italian club is eyeing up the Lyon man, Tanguy NDombele. What can you tell us?
Yeah, after a lot of reports linking Ndombele to Tottenham earlier this summer, the most recent reports are connecting Ndombele with AS Roma. It's actually a very interesting move, but at the time it seems a little unlikely. We've seen polarizing Olympique Lyonnais president Jean-Michel Aulas respond to tweets kind of linking the two, Ndombele and Roma. In response, he said, "I don't think Roma can do it." And in a cheeky nature, he added a laughing, crying emoji, which makes one think that he's fairly pessimistic that Roma will actually have the cash to shell out for the amount that he'd be looking for, his talented young French midfielder. The reports linking Ndombele and Roma were originally suggesting that Ndombele would be replacing Maxime Gonalons, himself a former Lyon midfielder. But it's an interesting suggestion given the fact that the two players aren't all that similar. Ndombele is, of course, a much more dynamic player than Gonalons. He's a much more box-to-box with a stronger work rate, one might say. So if you're trying to suggest that he would replace a player in Roma, I think a more suitable replacement would be Raja Nainggolan. Of course, the two midfielders both have great work rates. They like to get involved in both defense and attack, and they both excel at pushing the ball forward to kind of spearhead attacking movements. Comparing the two, Ndombele does have a slightly better defensive output in Ligue 1 than Nainggolan does have in Serie A. He averages right around in the offensive role is a pretty integral part. I would say he's also a relatively underrated dribbler. He has a great ability to get out of difficult situations thanks to his talent on the ball. We don't see that quite as much in Liga in the attacking third for Lyon, but more so in his own half when he's being pressed by opposition attackers. He does a great job of kind of escaping that press with a quick flick or a dribble move. Ndombele does have a great range of passing, although you could suggest that Nainggolan does complete more long balls and creates more chances. However, Ndombele did provide 6 assists in Ligue 1. I would suggest that he's truly a complete midfielder, and if he can add goals to his game, he'll be an even scarier midfielder for Roma if he does transfer there.
It's an interesting move, and one, Stefano, that obviously want to bring your opinion here, should Roma end up doing it, although our classic Jean-Michel Aulas watch is saying that AS Roma aren't quite good enough to bring him in the fold. We'll wait and see, obviously, but they obviously allowed Raja Nainggolan to leave this summer. He seems like an ideal replacement.
He does. He fits the profile of a lot of Roma targets the last few weeks. They're trying to go with a lot of younger players, going forward. Obviously, replacing Nainggolan would be key. He's obviously up there in age. I think that's why, they want to replace him. They want to get fresh young faces in the lineup. I haven't seen much of Ndombele's play at all, to be honest with you, but I did some research into him, and like you mentioned, very complete midfielder. 21 years of age, right? You always look at the age part factor. Young, so it could be an ideal target for Roma, but I've heard a lot of names getting thrown around. I know De Frel was just sent to Sampdoria, so I think they do need another midfielder. I know Leon Bailey was also thrown in there as well as rumors. So we'll see what brings Roma into the midfield.
Absolutely, and I'm just reminded of those Ndombele performances against Paris Saint-Germain earlier this season. If he can bring that to Roma, they would be absolutely delighted. But let's head to Germany now, Axel, and there's another Croatian catching the eye of Jose Mourinho. Another summer, another Croatian, but this time in the form of Ante Rebic. What can you tell us about a potential deal for the Eintracht Frankfurt man?
Well, it seems to be a transfer about, I think it seems to be around 40-50 million euros, which would be quite astounding for Eintracht Frankfurt, who of course signed him from Fiorentina for only, I think, 2 million euros basically early this summer. They announced that he signed him this spring, but of course the transfer first went through in beginning of July. So to gain a profit of around 40 million for a player of Ante Rebic class would be quite amazing for a club like Frankfurt, of course. He's extremely tenacious, Ante Rebic, quick, good with the ball, technical. But if Mourinho is looking at him as a goal-scoring option, I would probably tell him to look somewhere else, because Ante Rebic has scored 13 goals in the last 2 seasons, which I would say isn't good enough for Manchester United. But he does have an extremely good defensive work rate, which I'm pretty sure that Jose Mourinho would definitely prefer to have in his squad. Eintracht Frankfurt would do well to sell him for 40 or 50 million, because he's 25 years old, and he won't get much better than he is right now, possibly like a bit, but this is possibly the height of his ability. And it should be quite an easy option for them to sell to Manchester United if they would come knocking, which it seems like they are.
Especially at that amount, isn't it? That's the thing, Axel. It's a tough amount if United were to stump up that kind of fee to turn down for a club like Frankfurt. But at the same time, is he someone that is completely irreplaceable for them? Well, obviously they lost Marius Wolf as well this summer. A few other players maybe looking at the exit door, but with Kovac gone. But at the same time, he's not completely irreplaceable.
The thing is, he was first choice, but he wasn't. No player under Kovac was a firm starting player. He likes to switch around and test a few other players. But Frankfurt does have quite a few good options on the wings. They are looking to sign a winger as well. They just signed Chico Girales from Sporting, who is of course more like a midfield type, but he can play in the wings well. So he's not at all irreplaceable, and for that money, it should be a very easy option for them. It would be replaceable, and it would be very good money for a club like Eintracht Frankfurt.
Yeah, and especially after the transfer business they did last summer, you have to think that 2-3 players could be bought for the money if Rebic was to go to Manchester. Moving on to Italy, and big news really, Stefano, that came through just as we were airing really, and it's the story that sort of dragged on all week between Higuain, Bonucci and Caldara in the mix as well. Now that deal potentially closing in, according to Sky Italia, with Bonucci and Caldara being in a swap deal, Higuain being a loan, part of an agreement there as well to Milan. What can you tell us more about it, and does it sound like the wheels are starting to move on this deal?
Yeah, I think in the next coming days, we're definitely going to see what's going to unfold in this transfer. Chelsea was always linked with Higuain and Rugani, but like you mentioned, it looks like Bonucci and Calder will be swapped, and then Higuain on loan option, and then obviously there's a buyout fee as well. There were reports that Chelsea was also interested in Higuain, in which they wanted 60 million for him, and then Rugani 50. So they were looking at about 100 mil between the two. Obviously, that I know it looks like to be less of an interest, as Milan and Juventus want to work together on something. For me, they buy back Bonucci, which is, he's a complete defender in all aspects of his game, but you get rid of a young midfielder like defender like Caldera. Under 20, it's the Italian team. He has experience in the back at such a young age that, I think at Milan, if he can play with Romagnoli, it would be a good acquisition for Milan. Bonucci obviously would slide back into his old form like he was with obviously Chiellini, Benatia, Barzali if he does get in there. And then obviously Higuain, going to Milan, obviously, they have the loan option, which they'll try to make some money on him this year, and then hopefully, a buyout fee at the end of the year. So, we'll see in the next coming days to see what unfolds with the two clubs and maybe even Chelsea in the mix as well.
Yeah, because the wheels started to move a little bit more today with Leonardo saying that Bonucci was stating that he would like to move back to Juventus, and fair enough. But at the same time, those sort of wheels do twofold, really. And I want to discuss that with you, with Stefano, is that obviously Bonucci going back will be a big deal, but at the same time, this affects a couple of defenders, because if Caldara goes in this move, would Juventus still allow Rugani to leave as well and lose that extra cover, especially with them playing three at the back? Or will if that move does come off with Bonucci and Caldara swapping places, that maybe they want to hold on to Rugani even if they can get a sizable fee for him?
Yeah, a player like Rugani, you gotta, especially at his age, he's got he's got a lot of calcio to play, as you say in Italian, and to get rid of him, it wouldn't be ideal. Barzagli is getting to his last a year or so at Juventus. So if I were Juventus, I would definitely keep Rugani. Breed him as the next Cannavaro, Maldini, hopefully, and sneak him into that Italian team in the near future. He's young; he's got a lot of soccer to play. And I would definitely, I know the fee would be huge, but you go to the EPL, different quality of soccer, will he fit in, will he not, is always the question when you see a Serie A player heading to the EPL. So again, if I were Juventus, I'd definitely hang on to Rugani if they can. And then if they were to swap him for Caldara, or depending on what happens, Caldara is another player like Rugani, very young. A lot to learn, but getting younger would definitely be ideal for Juventus. Bonucci 31, Barzagli's getting up there, Benatti as well. So I think eyeing one of them, either keeping Rugani or getting Caldara would definitely be in their view of the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know they called the old lady, but you can't keep that going forever, I don't think, really. You need to sometimes take an eye on the future, really.
Yeah.
Onto our focus was really now, and onto France, and a former Liga man, really. It's more of a French international in Luca Dean, who's still at Barcelona, but there is interest from other clubs, Grant, especially heavily today. One French newspaper called them the other side of Liverpool, and that's maybe not their preferred way of calling Everton, but big interest there and a big bid on the way.
Yeah, we did see RMC Sport, which, is typically a very dependable outlet coming out of France, report that Everton have submitted a formal bid to Barcelona for a fee between 18 and 22 million euros. That paired with potential interest from Juventus, should Alexandro leave the Italian club, it could create quite a race for a left back who is typically in a backup role, which would be a very interesting change of pace. Right now, Barcelona is not standing in the way of a potential departure of their French left back. Of course, they'd prefer Digne to stay so that they don't have to scout and sign another left back. However, they would not deny him the chance to leave for more playing time, especially considering the fact that they signed him for 16.5 million euros in 2016. So with the figures that are being rumored for the signing of the left back, I think they'd let him leave, given they'd make a profit. The case of Digne is really quite an interesting one. Obviously, he missed out on a spot in France's 23-man World Cup squad, which in his left back position, that very much could have become his own position in the team. He's played for France 21 times, but because of his role in his past two clubs with Paris Saint-Germain and Barcelona, he's, like I said, kind of picked up a backup or bit part role. We've seen Benjamin Mendy, who came off a major injury for Man City this year, be selected in the squad, as well as Theo Hernandez, who barely a year ago wasn't even starting for either his club or country, take a spot in front of Lucas Digne. So if he were to leave Barcelona, I would imagine that it would be for more of a first-team place. Hopefully, if he does join Everton, he'd be able to displace Leighton Baines, who, of course, is 32 years old and has been kind of haunted by injuries in the last few years. Joining Everton would, of course, link him up with their new manager, Marco Silva, who, as we've seen in the Premier League, he likes to play with width, and he emphasizes the use of his fullbacks in attack. We've seen that with Jose Halabas as well as Andrew Robertson. And just like those two, Digne does like to hold up the ball and is a pretty excellent passer. he is 25 years old, and if he does want to jumpstart his career and kind of get more playing time, you would have to imagine that he'd have to leave Barcelona, because there's not much of a chance of him displacing Jordi Alba, who's been such a fixture in that Barcelona side for the last 5, 6, 7 years. So if he has to look for more first-team football, he should do it now, because there isn't too much time in waiting around and hoping that something else comes up.
No, it's always been a strange one with Dean, isn't it? The fact that he was so good at Lille when he started his career, we thought that move to Paris Saint-Germain would be the sort of kickstart of his international and European career, really. And then Kurzawa came in, he then went to Barcelona, surprisingly, pretty much knowing that he would be constantly a backup to Jordi Alba. But maybe a move does revitalise this. But you do feel, I think you're absolutely right, Grant, that maybe this is the last chance saloon for the man to get his career kick-started. But on to a player coming into France finally. We talked all last night how players leaving. But one we have heard of recently, and that's Hector Herrera, still being linked to a move to Lyon to boost their midfield that is young, dynamic, but Herrera, a player that maybe can add a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen Lyon's midfield do very well with their young players, like we were mentioning Ndombele before, but also with Lucas Cussart and Oussama Aouar. They have a very promising midfield as long as we can kind of keep them in Ligue 1 for the neutrals to enjoy. The move for Herrera to Lyon could be dependent on Ndombele's future, as Herrera and Ndombele are both fairly similar players. They like to play in a box-to-box role. They're very well-rounded. And just like Ndombele, Herrera has a very good work rate. Regardless of Ndombele's future, however, we have seen a lot of links between him and Lyon. Earlier in the summer, Porto reportedly rejected a 20 million euro bid from Lyon, so you would expect that they'd have to conjure up something a little bit more substantial than that for the Mexican signature. It would be interesting to see him leave Porto because he's such a beloved figure there. He's the team captain, and the club manager himself, Sergio Canseso, called him a wonderful professional, an extraordinary man, and a true captain, which is high praise indeed. These comments came in April, so it's kind of hard to envision Herrera leaving just a few months after this declaration of love by the manager. But as we've seen, lots of crazy things happens in football. Potentially Herrera will leave Porto for Lyon, but for a fee larger than 20 million euros.
It'd be interesting to see if he does join up with Lyon. But on to, it's not really transfer news really, but important news nonetheless for Bordeaux fans, because they may be up for sale, or at least having eyes placed upon them. Grant, what more can you tell us about it?
Yeah, this is very important news, and it kind of came out of nowhere. Obviously, we've seen Bordeaux sell a number of their players in recent years, most notably Malcolm, which of course came just a few days ago. Bordeaux, of course, one of Ligue 1 and France's most historic clubs. They've been owned by a French media holding company called the M6 Group since 1999. The M6 has really overseen one of Bordeaux's most successful eras, during which they won 2 Ligue 1 titles, 1 Coupe de France, 3 Coupe de la Ligue, and 2 Trophées des Champions. So undoubtedly one of their best eras, despite the fact that, as I said, they're a very storied club. It would be interesting to see them sell the club. The new owners that are reportedly swooping in for the Ligue 1 side are a US-based investment fund called General American Capital Partners, or GACP for short. GACP has no experience whatsoever, actually, in professional sports. If they do purchase Bordeaux, which is for a fee reportedly around 81.6 million euros by RMC Sport, that is kind of a low fee. This would be their first venture in professional sports, so it would be interesting to see how it all unfolds. Given the mixed track record of new American owners in European football, outside of perhaps John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group in Liverpool, it's hard to be incredibly optimistic about this new ownership group. It would obviously be a real shame to see this move crumble Bordeaux. As we've discussed, they're one of the most historic clubs, and they are typically a regular fixture in Europe for France, so they represent the game well. However, we do kind of have to trust M6, the previous owners, who should be selling them, if not today, in the coming days, as it seems like they really do care about the club. I mean, they've been owning the club for the last 19 years and have invested heavily. With M6, they helped them grow financially. They invested heavily in the impressive academy that Bordeaux now has. And they backed the city of Bordeaux itself in 2015 when they helped to build their state-of-the-art stadium. So M6 would be selling the club itself for kind of the modern spending that we've seen, especially in Ligue 1 with Paris Saint-Germain and AS Monaco as well, it's been fairly outlandish, one could say, and they're having trouble keeping up with all the growing financial power of the Ligue 1 clubs. So they see, or they're citing these kind of new investments made by other financial groups and new owners. And they're saying, well, if we can't do that, we might as well sell the club that we care so much about to perhaps a group that would be able to invest a little bit more into Bordeaux.
Yeah, and absolutely. And just to very quickly add on that, it was pretty much announced this afternoon, really. There's some technicalities still to play out, but a lot of the club staff have already been told that there will be new owners sort of within the coming days, at least anyway. But it's practically over the line. But we look forward to seeing how. Always new money is always interesting one way or the other, so we'll see how that seems to help Les Girondins. Dan, on to the Bundesliga and some interesting moves. There's some confirmed later on, and we'll discuss that in a moment, Axel. But we'll start in Dortmund, who last night revealed that they sort of ended their interest potentially in Mario Mandzukic. They are obviously still looking for a new striker after Batshuayi head back to Chelsea. They only really have Alexander Isak on the books at the moment. What else do we know?
Not much at all, actually. There's not many. I mean, there's not too many rumors, actually believable rumors about strikers coming to Dortmund. The Mandzukic rumors have been kind of, I wouldn't say retracted, but have been discredited by sources close to Dortmund. So that doesn't seem too reasonable. It would be a good signing if it would have happened, but it seems far-fetched at the moment. I think Hans-Joachim Watzke, the chief executive of Borussia Dortmund, stated that if they had 100 million, they would sign Robert Lewandowski. Which is, well, a fun comment, but it's very, it won't happen. And I think that's basically the only thing we've heard about it, actually, when it comes to Dortmund. Alexander Isak is, of course, the only one they have right now. They just lost Schürrle to Fulham, who was one of the options. They still have Maximilian Philipp, though, who will play a big part next season under Lucien Favre. There also some rumors going on about Batshuayi. Many people around Dortmund want Dortmund to keep him, or at least loan him in for one more year. That's basically it when it comes to Dortmund. It's they seem to be on the lookout for a striker, but there doesn't seem to be any actual tangible rumors that are that believable and that we should put energy into at the moment.
And that's the difficulty, though, Axel. I think this is quite an interesting story that's sort of developing at Dortmund, because they quite clearly need some kind of frontman there, unless they're going to rely on the young Swede to lead the line. Is this a worry heading into the season for the Black and Yellow, that without maybe not necessarily a big name striker necessarily, but at least another one through the door, that goal scoring, heaven forbid, for a Dortmund side who've been pretty on top of it for the last 6-7 years, it might be in a bit of an issue?
Definitely. I mean, they've had a very good attacker since Lucas Barrios in I think 2009. They had at least one every year. They had Lucas Barrios, then came Lewandowski, and then came Aubameyang, and kind of like overlapped. But since Aubameyang left, well, Batshuayi scored a few goals, but he wasn't that reliable up top. He wasn't that kind of main man to look to for bags of goals, which of course both Lewandowski, Barrios, and Aubameyang were. So I mean, right now they are basically relying on Marco Reus, Alexander Isak, and Maximilian Philipp. Three very strange options. Of course, Lucien Favre knows Marco Reus very, very well, as he was the main man. He was, well, basically the main man in Reus' development, and he could possibly return Reus to a secondary striker role and play Maximilian Philipp up top. But it is definitely a position of worry for Dortmund, and they should really be on the lookout for someone to play up top, because Alexander Isak isn't good enough to start for them if they want to achieve something. And Maximilian Philipp is a very unclear player at the moment. We have basically only seen him play on the wings so far, so it seems to be very, very strange to rely on him for the main goal scoring of next season, which Borussia Dortmund will definitely need, without doubt.
And that's the interesting thing at the moment, isn't it? It's either trust the young striker or move some wingers inside and hope that one can pull off a Dries Mertens. But we shall wait and see, depending on if some moves happen later. On to a player we've discussed earlier this week, and that's Max Meyer, who looked like he was on his way to Hoffenheim. I don't know if that's still the case, Axel, or is there any other clubs come in for him, or is he still moving towards heading for the final year of Julian Nagelsmann?
Hoffenheim seem to be in for him still. There seems to be some negotiations between two parties, but I think Max Meyer's wage demands are still too high. I think it was 6 million a year, which is, and of course the whole Schalke debacle where his agent claimed that Max Meyer was utmost world class will probably scare some clubs away. But it seems to be Hoffenheim seems to be leading the line for him. I would suggest that possibly Leipzig could be in for him. There could be some other clubs. Borussia Dortmund could be in for him as well, but it would be very controversial considering he's like born and bred Schalke. But Hoffenheim seems to be the main team to be in for him at the moment. However, his wage demands are ludicrous, which is why no club has picked him up yet.
Which is the interesting bit of this one, really, Axel, because obviously he was linked with a lot of clubs at the start of the summer window, knowing that he was leaving Schalke because of these bully claims, the fact that he didn't change. But at the same time, last season, he had an excellent season, sort of shifting positions from sort of an attacking midfielder further back into sort of a number 6 role. So you would think that more clubs would be coming in for him, but are those wage demands and the accusations, are they holding him back from potentially getting a bigger move that he would be seeking?
Absolutely. Max Meyer is a very good player. He had a very good season, at least until March. He faded a bit at the end to get Tedesco. And I think the whole debacle with Schalke and his agent agent Wittmann has without doubt damaged his reputation in Germany at least, possibly even abroad. And after the last season, without that whole debacle with Schalke, I think he could easily have gone to Arsenal or Liverpool or like a big English club, or even perhaps Bayern Munich. He could have followed Leon Goretzka. But as it looks right now, that has generally damaged him. It has damaged his reputation. It's damaged him as a player, him as a figure on the market. So I think his value right now has definitely gone down quite a bit, and he should adjust his wage demands to accommodate that. Of course, I don't think he will do that though. But yeah, it has definitely damaged him and his reputation in Germany and possibly even abroad, without doubt.
Yeah, money corrupts all sometimes. Briefly on some confirmed news, there's 3 real transfers that we can sort of talk about in Germany at least. The Muto deal is all but complete. The Klaassen deal is all but complete, and also the other one today from you've already mentioned it as well, Axel. Chicho Heraldes from Sporting Lisbon, obviously the club having their own issues, of course, but Frankfurt obviously picking him up. What do you think to those 3 deals?
The Klaassen deal has the potential to be the signing of the summer. They of course used the money from Damien Delaney, which was 25 million to go from him, I think, and spent I think 14 million, which is a club record fee on David Klaassen, which is as I said, a very good signing. I think it could be a very good signing at least. Of course, 40 million for a club like Werder Bremen is lots of money. Without doubt, it's lots of money. But I think he has he has the potential to do something big at Bremen and to possibly propel them into top 7, and therefore, of course, Europe, which is their goal. Without shadow of a doubt. The Muto deal is interesting because Mainz definitely needed to keep him, I would say, because they are facing the relegation threat. And their attack has been quite, I would say, difficult to explain in the last 2 years, because they haven't had a main striker since John Cordoba left. And Jose Mourinho did well last season, but he was like the sole threat up top. So when he's left now, it seems quite stale for them. But Newcastle are definitely getting a very, very good player if he does get a work permit, of course. Giraldes is interesting as well. Seems to be a very talented player. However, the loan deal is without the buyout clause, which many in Frankfurt claim is horrible, because Frankfurt, of course, experienced the cons of that with Jesus Vallejo, when he performed immensely and then just left without Frankfurt having a say about it, back to Real Madrid, where he, since hasn't played a bit. So I think the general consensus in Frankfurt is that they shouldn't loan anymore. They should sign players, because they have the money to do it. So I think Chico Grealish is a very good player, but to loan him without buyout clause seems a bit odd, I would say. Very odd. But he's a very talented player and would definitely improve the squad.
Right, let's hope he impresses, and Frankfurt maybe can stump up some money for a change at least. Anyway, on to Serie A, and a lot of news that is more domestic this evening, Stefano. They've sort of looked inwards rather than outwards. Stefano, I want to start with Domenico Berardi. We've talked about him briefly within the sort of Roma winger search, but another club is looking at the Sassuolo man as well, and that's La Viola. Have had a good summer already, but they're looking to maybe make a move on the man who's been terrorizing other teams for a number of years.
Yeah, well, it looks like Fiorentina, according to Calcio Mercato today, are looking to offer Sassuolo 20 million for Berardi. It was rumored that Roma were targeting him after Malcolm was swooped up by Barcelona. Obviously, when you sell a big player like Berardi to a small side like Sassuolo, they're trying to get every dollar they can. Their value for Berardi is about 30 million. They're trying to get, a bid in and around 20 to 25. Fiorentina. Now, does Roma come in and swoop him up and maybe give him that 30 million? We'll soon find out in the next coming days. Berardi, pacey on the wing. Last year he didn't have the greatest year, only 4 goals in 32 appearances, I believe. Again, a player that just one of those players that just performed very well for Sassuolo, the past 2-3 years, as well as De Frel, who's also interested, who also was leaving Roma for Sampdoria. So we'll see what the situation brings. I think Berardi would definitely fit the description that Roma are looking for. Now it's just a matter of, the price and who's going to soup him up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting one, really, because obviously Sassuolo have been able to have a fair amount of good wingers ready at the moment.
They have.
With Politano as well, obviously.
Inter.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be interesting to see if he does finally get that move, because Berardi's been linked a number of times of having some kind of move somewhere. Juventus, AC Milan, all sorts in the past few years. But I'll wait and see him. Onto a man who may be staying at the club he's signed at, and it's not an enormous amount of surprise that Miralem Pjanic is wanted by Juventus, but there was rumours of an offer from Manchester City earlier this season. Supposedly they were offering, they're looking for around 100 million for the Bosnian, but at the moment there might be more talks that he might be staying in the black and white.
It is. It's looking towards, that situation is going to come with a renewal. I know that Juventus, there was rumors of Pogba, coming back to the old lady, and Pjanic on his way out. That looked to die down within the last, few days, with the likes of Manchester City, Chelsea, Barcelona, all rumored for, his services. I think the value that Juventus put on him was a little bit too much for the clubs to go after. Him. Rumors have it that at the end of the transfer, they're going to give him that renewal. in which he'll earn 7 million a season from the 5 million he was earning last season. He was one of the most, a dominant player last year for Juventus. I struggled a little bit with injuries, but I think with Ronaldo at Juventus now, that's going to be definitely a 1-2 combination. A Pirlo type player. I think he's going to be a key for Juventus moving forward, especially in the Champions League and obviously the Serie A.
Yeah, I don't think it will just be fans or Massimiliano or Gregory that will be happy that that he'll be staying. So a certain Portuguese man will be pretty delighted that there's someone like him,
Exactly.
much like Modric or Kroos, setting him up a little bit more. On to the sort of final deal tonight, and the one that's been confirmed at least. I'm throwing this one at you a little bit, Stefano, because I forgot this one in the order, which was De Frel. We've mentioned him a few times last night. He has headed to Sampdoria now. His sort of spell at Roma that hasn't really taken off, ending quite abruptly, but he did well at Sassuolo before. Do you think a move to Sampdoria might reignite his Serie A career?
I think so. I think a player like De Frel, he needs playing time. He needs, time on the pitch. He only had 20 appearances last year for Roma. A player like that needs to play. I know at Sassuolo, he had 20 plus goals, 10 plus assists the year that he left. Definitely, hopefully, revitalizing his career, and then maybe joining back at the end of the season to Roma, depending on the type of season he has. He only had 1 goal last year, so hopefully a transfer to a smaller side like Sampdoria, where you'll see a lot more pitch time than at Roma, will definitely hopefully revitalize his career.
Yeah, and learn to some excellent players around him, especially Fabio Caravaggio. That's all that we have for this evening. I do very quickly want to mention one of my favourite transfer stories of tonight, and if you haven't seen it, do check it out, because Nolt put out one of these classic transfer videos. Roma are a famous couple at the moment for doing some excellent ones, but they had a little bit of a fortnight sort of mixed up with their player, the signing of Lucas Evangelista with a sort of 2-minute fortnight video. It's a very strange one. I implore you to check it out, because it needs to be seen to be believed more than anything. But it's just another epitome of another crazy week in the transfer window. My thanks to Stefano, Alex, Axel, and Grant for their company this evening, and same to all of you at home. Please do join us again on Monday. We're going to take the weekend off, rightfully so. We have to rest. Now, the transfer window won't, so do keep your eyes peeled on all our Twitter feeds and everything like that, and we will be back on Monday to bring you the highlights of what has likely been the crazy world of the transfer window. Good night.